Green Goblin and Doc Ock have the same exact struggle as Peter Parker, which is
too much money. What can I possibly do with all this money? You know what? I know. I'm going to inject myself or stick in my spinal cord something really evil. Something really, really evil. And nothing will go wrong.
Shouldn't you, as a world-renowned physicist and scientist, realize that if Peter Parker, with his spidey sense, realizes what you're doing, you're going to kill yourself because the collider's coming at you? And my theory, my crazy fan theory was like...
I looked at you, and it was like you were just waiting for her to pop back up, and you were just totally convinced it was just this...
I was, though.
This ridiculous take-up. Like, you're just like, wow, they milking you, get up. If you have a lot of money, you have a moral obligation not to do that thing that you're thinking of doing.
So, Will, do you know that with great power comes great moral responsibility?
Well, I know
to do that thing?
Exactly. I think if you have something or other that something's that something, then you ought to do that thing. You know, that should be our new catchphrase.
Do that thing?
Yeah.
I think Nike has a little bit of a IP on that.
Oh, is it really?
Just
like,
okay, so if you were a company and you'd had "do that thing" as your slogan, would Nike come after you? Is my question.
Certainly Nike would come after you. The question is whether Nike would win.
Oh, okay.
So Nike's is. Are we allowed to even say it, or are they going to come after us by even saying the actual name?
What? What do you mean
the actual slogan?
Just do it.
You just said it. Well,
I said it twice.
Now we're going to find out.
What are they going to do about it?
Well, you just said a third time. Rephrasing it.
Okay, I do apologize. I love Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know he's one of your biggest sponsors.
So you think love of someone that they own is going to, not own, sponsor, of course.
Sponsor will. Come on. Jeez.
Well, they own the NFL. They own not the NFL. No, they own. Do they have stuff in the NFL?
I mean, I think it's more Adidas.
Okay. I got my companies wrong.
But now we're gonna get their RAF because we just mentioned their competitor.
But this is my point: is that Company X owns, what's the one I'm looking for? The Athletic Enterprise X. Company X owns,
and all parts and representations thereof.
Yeah. What I'm saying is the NFL is secretly run by such and such a company, and
So Spider-Man, say I think what's interesting about Spider-Man is that if he did choose to become an athlete, what would that look like? You know what? I've always wondered about
we do know actually. We watched what's his name?
Incredibles, Dash, run track.
Oh, I don't know. The guy who Mark Zuckerberg ripped off.
Oh,
he diluted his shares in Facebook.
Andrew
that
Garfield.
guy, yeah, Garfield.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield.
So, we saw him play basketball briefly, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And he shattered the.
Do you think in the
glass thing,
major sports leagues, instead of drug testing, have to test for your superhero gene or supervillain gene? To be do you have super stamina or strength that you're hiding from us?
Well, how would they test for that? Do we know that it's testable?
I don't. I mean, unless you go full Shazam and you're in your backyard with Zachary Levi and you're just kind of doing flight tests.
It's incredibly obvious, right? But I mean,
but if you're trying to hide it, that's different.
Well, that's my question. Is obvious? Can you do a blood test? Is it in your DNA? I mean, in Spider-Man, Raimi's Spider-Man, it's what's going on? It's literally.
What do you think?
Taking off his DNA and reinserting its own.
So
it's very
unsettling. How every college mandates certain vaccines and blood some schools will
wait, what?
Right?
What?
going to college
What are you
or
talking
going
about?
to
Is this where you say, "Oh yeah, well, they took my DNA and everything."
going to college or going to the doctor's office for
Okay.
Sam Raimi's Peter Parker. And
Mm-hmm.
does he ever
Yeah.
does he just have to refuse having like a blood sample taken and say like
Well, but
doctor's
why?
like, you know what I mean?
Because is it going to come out? Oh, Peter, we need to
You find
retake.
tiny little nano spiders in your bloodstream.
We need to retake that sample. You're literally this is spider
Okay.
DNA. I don't know what
Oh,
to tell you, kid. I mean, is this some kind of prank, bro?
It's kind of like that scene from Ratatouille, that like
Yeah.
agent when he's talking to Chef Skinner. He's like, "We had to do the test twice. The first time it came back as rodent hair." Ha ha ha.
I'm surprised that hasn't been like meme to death.
Speaking of memes, thank you for guessing my little game I wanted to play with you.
Oh, is that so? Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you 1 minute, Will. I'm just curious to see how many Spider-Man Sam Raimi memes can you come up with off the top of your head in 1 minute?
You mean like already created ones?
Yeah, like popular,
Like popular famous
just
ones.
popular famous memes.
Oh,
you
you-
have 1 minute, go.
Oh, you're gonna be disappointed. I don't.
Oh, you
I
can't name
I
them?
don't know many of these.
Just come on, just go through the Spider-Man films in your head.
Wait, all of them are just the Raimis?
Just the Raimi films.
Oh no.
I'm testing an hypothesis here, and,
Okay.
and you are the test
Well,
subject.
clearly this isn't it. I'm not your guy.
Well, I
but-
figure because you don't know, you're not a meme person, like a memery lord.
meme
You're not a
person?
meme lord. I figured
I'm
that
not-
you'd be a
I'm
good
not
like
a
test for
meme
that.
lord. Oh boy. Okay, let me think of one. So like an already existing meme, right?
Yeah, so I'll give you a good one.
Oh, you're gonna help me out.
The
The ACT prep question.
Spider-Man 3, him
Yeah.
dancing, black
Yeah.
emo, Spidey dancing
Yeah.
outside the store.
Yeah.
Right, that's a meme.
Oh, okay.
That sort of thing.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
So, trying to think how it goes even.
Well, we have already used 40 seconds. You had a minute.
So-
I'll raise it to like 2 or 3.
So, I don't even know where it starts. It just doesn't even. I can't put them together.
What do you? Okay.
It's like
Okay, my hypothesis has already failed.
so
I was just thinking that you'd be able to rattle them off. Like,
no so Mr. Sullenberger something fix his damn door.
I will when you fix this damn door. That is a good meme, yes.
I don't know how those two
There's-
would go together, but I know it would. Just with the random amount of thinking, it would.
There's this J. Jonah Jameson laughing one.
Oh.
Want a raise? Ah ha ha! You serious? Get out of here! There's that one.
That's right.
There's the Green Goblin in a suit chasing Spidey, and you see Green Goblin's butt and his thick
butt?
Yeah, thick Green Goblin. You don't know what that means?
I have proudly been a teetotaler of thick goblin asses.
Okay,
all my life.
So basically, I'll end the game here.
How did I do?
You got 1. I was hoping you'd reach 10, but
Oh, I can keep going. I can
yeah, but
try.
I don't want to be here for the next 15 minutes because my theory, my
Here's-
grand theory
but
was
wait,
that.
before you even give your grand theory,
Okay.
I just want to say, in case I just seem like a.
Can you just name quotes from the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans? You know what I mean?
You make me seem like a Christian, like a major. That's a pun. I don't think Kristen Dunst is a dunce. I just,
Wow.
it was
You're a man.
it was a pun. But my point, exactly what you just said. I know quotes from the films.
Yeah. So
and I remember loving the first Spider-Man film, and I can't, I loved it. I loved it.
impressive. That's for all the fans out there who know what that line is
Yeah.
from, or where that line is.
I surrender.
There's the crying Peter Parker when Uncle Ben gets shot. That one's a meme.
You're
meme.
laughing. You're
Yeah, it's
you're
a-
laughing.
There's the cunning Peter Parker from Spider-Man 3 where he has kind of like that face where he's side-eyeing something and he's smirking.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah,
There's that meme. There's
that's correct. Yeah, I know that one.
"Yeah, you know how much I sacrificed line. That's been memed. There's, oh, I'm something of an expert myself one. There's
Something of an expert myself.
I'm something of an expert. I'm something of a scientist myself. Sorry, I said the line wrong.
I think I recognize that one too. Actually, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I do know a few of these actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So couldn't come up with them.
Getting a good discount at Walmart. I'm something of a scientist myself.
Oh,
You know, that kind
I
of meme.
see.
There's the Spider-Man 2 meme where he's in the alley and his powers have like failed him for the first time in that film, and he's like looking at his hands like, oh, how did this happen? That one's been memed, right? You put like one word on his hand and one word on his other hand.
Oh, okay.
So my grand theory was that, and I think it failed, was that if you, my brother who doesn't know a ton of memes, could name 10 memes very quickly from the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, it ends the debate here and now which Spider-Man is the best version of Spider-Man. Because obviously the popular masses have spoken, the internet has spoken. The one that's most memed and most recognizably memed has to be the best Spider-Man.
But that's not necessarily true. Although it's a compelling argument.
Because best meaning most popular, right?
Well, you just snuck that one in like it made sense. I mean, maybe.
But clearly my hypothesis is wrong, which means we have to go back to the drawing board and use our red.
I did recognize a lot of the memes that you said, in fairness.
That's true.
But I guess the question is, doesn't that speak to like the micro digestibility of the film, as opposed to
like how quotable it is?
Well, yeah,
you know
how quotable it is, how you can take out single frames and it's cool, right? Mm-hmm. Because I can think of films that aren't memeable, but I still, think are great.
In a serious sense, so the reason I was thinking of this game was I was thinking about the Amazing Spider-Man with Garfield and the MCU Tom Holland Spider-Man, and realizing that I was finding it hard to think of memes or just even straight up quotes from those two film franchises. Now, granted, we grew up with the Sam Raimi version.
Sure.
Like, Spider-Man was my introduction to comic books and superheroes. Spider-Man was the reason I grew interested in superheroes in the first place. So, like, for me, it's a little bit more ingrained because it's, like, nostalgic, and I watch them a lot of times, so that's a big part of it. But at the same time, I still felt like, well, that's not just me, though, because the internet is in love with memeing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
Well, I think there is something to be said about how, in my mind, let's just toss the third film of the Raimi for a second. But like for the first two, definitely, they seem to approach things with sort of, I don't know how to put it exactly, like a comic book sense of quips. Or like there's something that's very rehearsed about. Whereas watching the chemistry of sorry,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say the chemistry of Garfield and Stone is remarkable, right? Mm-hmm. And I think trumps the previous iteration, right? As far as the instantaneous, the chemical feeling, right, that you get from them, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, it helps that they were actually together at this time. I believe. But I don't remember any of their lines because they're saying the lines for themselves, not saying it for the audience. So you get the feeling that they're in love and you kind of smile along with the lines, but you don't, there's nothing iconic about it because there's nothing cleverly written about them. They're just kind of hanging out. And
the downside of having great chemistry in a film, I feel like, is that it does lead you to improv more, which means you don't, part of what makes a quotable line is the fact that it's been carefully crafted to be quotable.
Usually.
If that makes sense.
Usually. I can think of a few lines that aren't necessarily right.
Yeah, sometimes they're not.
I'm walking here, or but why male models,
But, the line, I am Iron Man, from obviously the original Iron Man, and then in Endgame, that was
crafted, I'm pretty sure,
well crafted, but it's not the reason it's quotable is not just because of the words I am Iron Man, it's a 4-word sentence, but because of the subtext of what that means, what it means to be Iron Man, and how much between Iron Man to Endgame, how much weight that carried. with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, there's more than I think the other two. There's a devotion to the comic books themselves that surpass either Garfield or Holland, in my opinion. Right? The the famous kiss, the one that went on MTV's Kiss of the Year, I believe, right? In the first Spider-Man.
Best kiss.
Yeah, best kiss. The way they built that is very much like a comic book would build towards a full page spread color, graphic where you turn the page and all of a sudden you have this beautiful image of them kissing in the rain, him upside down, her pulling. Like, I almost imagine the comic book version of that being you have in the right hand corner a little triangle of her reaching over, pulling his mask up slightly, or down slightly, so his mouth is unrevealed. You turn the page and then they're kissing, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of the way the film plays it. In Spider-Man 2, the scene where he dumps his costume in the garbage can and walks away from it, that if you still it at a very specific moment when he's walking away, that is literally a reproduction image of the Spider-Man comic arc where he does that. And it's literally that comic page, which is, again, a full panel spread of him walking away. And I can't remember what the text box says, but I'm pretty sure the line is also used in Spider-Man 2 for that scene. For me, Spider-Man Sam Raimi sticks truer to the comic book, right? The true, so I think what's interesting about Spider-Man, right? I was thinking about this a lot, is why do we love Spider-Man, right? Because we spent the whole month of December marathoning our way through all the Spider-Man films. So I've been thinking a lot about why we love Spider-Man, why he's so successful, what he means to be Spider-Man, because it gets kind of meta with the third Tom Holland film in Far From Home. I'm not going to spoil anything, obviously.
Well, you've certainly spoiled enough by even saying it's meta, but
I think anyone who knows even the basic idea of what that film is, it knows it's going to get meta, right?
Okay.
But the original Spider-Man was created, during the 60s. I would have to look up the actual specific year. He was created by Kirby and Stan Lee because there was a need for a superhero who felt of the people. They looked around and they said, we have all these great superheroes. We have, by that point, Superman, Batman. I think Wonder Woman was out by that point for DC. And then for Marvel's side, they had Captain America as I'm pretty sure their biggest superhero. But what they kind of said was that we don't have any young superheroes who are for the teenage audience.
Yeah, what I
sorry.
find interesting is that usually when you think of the teenager crowd, right? It's the sidekick, it's the mentorship program, right? It's one day you will be me, right? The hero, right? But for now you're just kind of my sidekick, right? And hence you become the boy or the girl, right? You're a bat boy. Well, what's his name? Robin.
It's kind of
less than a bat. You're a bird.
It's a weird thing how shows and movies, when their target audience whenever a media, their target audience expands well beyond what they originally imagined it'd be, and then they have to adapt to that, right? Because they looked around, they said all of our teenagers are sidekicks, but they're right because Batman has Robin, Captain America had Bucky, who was a teenager in those comics,
and they're aspiring to become the adult version. But then obviously the question becomes, what if they
either are already they don't have anyone?
Exactly, they're not waiting in the shadows of someone. They are that person. They are that superhero, and they create and also that they invent themselves on their own terms, right? That there's no playbook of how to become this person, right? It's just you are the person, and then you lean into it with your.
You have to work on the fly. You have to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, with your creativity, with your invention, with your genius that you have. Yes.
There's so the original comics that was interesting is that it was the first teenage superhero that was right, because Superman or Captain America, they don't have to deal with God, I have to prepare for college or my high school exams, and the reason Spider-Man was created was because they wanted a character like that. They wanted a character that was like, you know, being a superhero is tough. It's real tough, especially if you have to try to balance your own life, your real like alter ego life, right? Because not everyone can be a superhero, and that's the only thing they need to focus on, right? And so, in the comics, what happens in the original comics is that you have Peter Parker go through much of the problems that Sam Raimi puts into his trilogy, which is Peter Parker has to deal with a little bit of fame. Doesn't you like in the comics? He embraces it. He actually goes like on a television show as Spider-Man to talk about how much he loves being Spider-Man or something like that.
This is very Spider-Man 3 then, isn't it?
Yeah. But then
They love me.
But you know, in Sam Raimi's the original Spider-Man, he goes to a boxing match and then lets a robber go, and the shooter then he believes shoots Uncle Ben. In the original Spider-Man comics, that scene is actually the television studio. He lets the shooter go at like the television station or something like that for some reason, and that shooter then leaves. So like the price of his in the comics, the idea is that the price of his fame is literally the death of his uncle.
Interesting.
And Sam Raimi fixed that because he didn't fix it, but he changed it to be more about the price of going after something you want, right? Because time and time again, Peter Parker, Sam Raimi's Peter Parker, is punished for trying to be a normal person because he just wants a car. He wants a car to impress Mary Jane, you know? So I think it's interesting how Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, more than the other Spider-Mans, has to deal with real life consequences for doing things, for trying to be Spider-Man. Because I you know what I mean? I guess, and in a weird way, that is something I miss from Tom Holland's MCU, is there's less of a sense of him living his day-to-day life, because all of the things that happen to him are like cataclysmic world changing events, if that makes sense.
Well, I think I agree. I certainly don't get a sense, of what I recall, of him really being at school.
Like Far From Home and No Way Home.
I'm just trying to think if I really do. No, even in Homecoming.
In Homecoming, yeah.
I mean, or do I? Am I just short-selling it?
I mean,
because
they do have
I mean, obviously he's at school and he goes to Homecoming and he's in detention and whatnot, but I don't know. It just,
He's dealing... Because the villain he faces is the Vulture in that one, and he's dealing with a very large-scale operation.
Mm-hmm. And we don't get the origin, so we don't get the point at which he has to... we don't get the point at which he has to, as a novelty, have to balance his superhero life,
Right.
And his
Because one thing they do is they skip Uncle Ben's death. They don't show that. They just have already started after the fact, and they haven't placed, unlike Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's origin story, part of their origin as being Spider-Man is Uncle Ben's murder. Whereas Tom Holland, like, he doesn't ever bear that guilt. He doesn't ever have to deal with that. Like, as him as Spider-Man, that was on him. So, in terms of, like, the fights being personal, Tobey Maguire, the first film, is literally his best friend's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, Mary Jane's boyfriend's father, that he has to fight somebody that he's looked up to and respected his whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Spider-Man 2, it's Doc Ock, it's Dr. not Dr. Osborn, Dr. Octavius, and in that one, he's facing someone he, again, respects and admires as one of his best friends, co-workers, is Harry Osborn's employee. But he also has a personal, very real discussion with him about what it means to love, what it means to be great, what it means to have responsibility, right, when they have tea together. Third one, he's facing Sandman, the person who actually did kill his uncle. He's facing Eddie Brock, Venom, the person who tried to steal his job. So all the villains have something in common, which is they try to screw over Peter Parker personally.
I guess
they
so.
didn't try to screw over Spider-Man. They tried to go after Peter Parker himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Holland, the first one with the Vulture, with Michael Keaton, that doesn't happen until super late, until the big reveal of who the Vulture's real life persona, like ordinary normal person persona is. The second one, right, is a personal temptation of you can surrender being the next Iron Man, figuratively.
Sure, and at the very end, he is personally his friends are
Personally threatened and attacked him.
personally attacked by the drones.
Mm-hmm. But for some reason, there's something less emotional about that villain fight than...
Oh?
To me,
Yeah.
at least. To me, like, watching all the Spider-Mans, like, in a row, I was struck by how much the original Spider-Man trilogy made me feel emotional watching the villain fights. Like, the ultimate villain fights.
Well, I'll certainly say this. Watching them get stuck in where they, like, in the vault with the crown jewels or wherever they are.
Yeah.
With the drone. I can say that right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're assuming everyone at this point has either seen all of the Spider-Mans
Wait, all of them? We can just spoil
or
everything?
except Far From Home.
Oh, we're
Except
not
No Way
supposed-
Home. Except No Way
We're
Home.
not supposed to talk about No Way Home.
Yeah.
Oh.
We don't have to.
Okay.
We don't have to. I'm kind of assuming that people haven't, or maybe we should, but
Maybe. With that scene, I felt like they were being given something to do.
in Far From Home.
Yeah.
Oh, when they're in the vault in London.
Yeah, I feel like they're being given something to do as opposed to being threatened with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I suppose in a minor way you could say the same about like Spider-Man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like what's MJ doing? I don't know, screaming and falling. Now what's she doing? Screaming and falling. I mean, it doesn't feel quite the same because the stakes are like right there in your face,
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've divvied them up. Does that make sense? But they're not doing anything. Does that make sense? I don't know how to put it. Like, I don't know. They were just running and hiding, right?
Well,
they weren't trying to achieve anything, were they? Except survive.
Like, MJ and Ned and Happy and I guess also Flash, right? They separate from the school group. They're running away from the bridge. They get into the vault. Yeah, I kind of agree. They're kind of there as a plot contrivance more than anything. It doesn't feel like they needed to be put in danger. They just were.
What would have been interesting in my mind, and this is just from like to up the ante or something, just give them something to do, actively something to do. I don't know, like I can't even think what it would be, but like, we need to hack into the such and such, which can give me Spider-Man coverage, or shut down the drones temporarily, or something.
Well, kind of the Gwen Stacy thing. For as much as I have problems with the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which we probably won't get into all here in this episode, the one thing that I thought made, and again, I'm assuming you've seen the Amazing Spider-Man films. Sorry, listeners. What made Gwen Stacy's death so hard was one.
She dies? Oh, man.
Was that she was an active participant in that villain scene fight at the end. Like, without Gwen Stacy being there, you make the argument because of the way they staged it, they choreographed the scene. Maybe Spider-Man doesn't make it out of that fight. Mm-hmm. He needs Gwen Stacy there in order to come out ahead.
You know what I thought was really funny about your reaction to that scene when you watched it?
Funny?
Yeah, funny. Is I looked at you and it was like you were just waiting for her to pop back up. And you were just totally convinced it was just this ridiculous take-up. Like, you're just like, wow, are they milking you? Get up. Get up, lady. And then they cut to the funeral. And you sit there and you look at us like, what? And we're like, what do you mean, what? Gwen's death falling is a classic. Of course you could have seen it coming. And you were shocked.
For whatever reason, for all my knowledge of superheroes and comic books.
Well, it's good that you didn't
I didn't remember watching Amazing Spider-Man 2 that Gwen Stacy dies that way.
So you truly, until the funeral shot, were convinced she was just going to
I thought she was going to be okay.
Oh, so you really
Or a part of me thought maybe she was going to be.
So you really did think they were
because
milking it.
I knew that Gwen Stacy sometimes dies in the comic series.
Yes.
I did not remember that she dies falling like that. And I also did not remember when the film came out that was a big thing. But like after the fact, I remembered 2013, and I went, "Oh wait, I remember now." Gwen Stacy, like the fact that Gwen Stacy dies in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a big deal for a lot of people, and that just totally slipped my mind until watching it, and I truly had just a heartbreaking experience watching that film because of that moment. But also the montage of Andrew Garfield looking at the cemetery and the seasons passing. I was like, man, that's tough.
Well, it's tough because the deep responsibility he feels for it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the times they certainly give credit to the, to the creators of the film, to Mike Webb. Something
that I was thinking about with Spider-Man, and this might sound hokey, and I hope it doesn't, is kind of the idea that, with great power comes great responsibility.
What?
Is one of the greatest lines ever in regardless of the genre, because of how universal it is, right? You could literally have Uncle Ben saying that to the audience member, and in a way that the way they stage it, in Sam Raimi's especially, is to the audience. In the original comics, this is a fun bit of trivia, the line is actually...
to do that thing.
Not the Martin Sheen version. It's, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And so it's a little bit more... so Sam Raimi kind of made that line a little bit more concise. But also, trivia is that line is directed at the reader. In the comic book panel, it's after Uncle Ben has been shot and killed, and Peter Parker's trying to deal with that, and it's actually like a narration text box where it says, with great power there must also come great responsibility, and it's to the reader, not specifically to anyone.
Interesting. So Spider-Man, the entire comic, was just this entire ruse to convince children to buck up and take responsibility.
But I think that's what makes Sam Raimi's Spider-Man so amazing to me.
That's a weird way to put it.
Why I love Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is that, to me at least, Spider-Man truly does more than any other version of Spider-Man, arguably Miles Morales' in Spider-Man, and the Spider-Verse animated one. But just sticking with like the 3 trilogies, or the one that should have been a trilogy. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was going to be a trilogy, but then they canceled it.
There ain't no Amazing Spider-Man 3.
But Sam Raimi's more than anyone else sticks to the original comic book desire, which is to create a superhero that is for the people, of the people. Someone that is an everyday person.
What is a total dweeb?
No, but someone like who deals with kind of the universal feeling of like trying to balance at a certain point in your life, you have so many different responsibilities, and you have to feel superhuman to kind of navigate through all of them at times. And I think that's what makes the original Spider-Man so fascinating. That's what makes the character so fascinating to me, is that he is the representation of what responsibility is. It's dealing with things that aren't your fault, but you have to still take them on anyway. It's taking on things that you don't have to get involved with, but feel like you have a moral obligation to.
Do that thing.
Stop it! And so I think, so for me, that's why my little meme quest failed. But at the end of the day, when I thought about it, I kind of decided, I do think, in my personal opinion, Tobey Maguire is my favorite Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
For those reasons. Because I think he sticks true to me what is the essence of Spider-Man, which is somebody who could be anyone, taking on more things than at times he's capable of, but does so with a struggle, but does so because he feels he has the the moral obligation to do that thing. You know what? I'm just gonna say it.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's what we wanted all along.
Yeah.
But I also feel like that's also why I love the villains in Spider-Man 1 and 2. Because they have the same inclination. And I think, shoot, I can't say it because I don't want to
You don't want to get sued by Nike.
I want to avoid sport. I don't want to get sued by Nike. But thematically, the villains of Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, and something I wish the Amazing Spider-Mans did but didn't, the villains of Doc Ock, and I flipped them in my head, of Green Goblin and Doc Ock have the same exact struggle as Peter Parker, which is
Too much money. What can I possibly do with all this money? You know what? I know. I'm going to inject myself or stick in my spinal cord something really evil. Something really, really evil. And nothing will go wrong.
The moral inclination to use whatever you have at your disposal to help the world. Right? And the difference between Peter Parker and, say, Norman Osborn and Dr. Octavius is money. But it also is that their experiments went wrong.
Well, yeah. And also, I mean, if you have a lot of money, you have a moral obligation not to do that thing that you're thinking of doing.
When we said spend your money wisely,
no,
you kind of took that advice and threw it out the window, Norman.
Because what Mr. Osborn does, right, is he's feeling the crunch, right? They're going to shut down his project, right? The military, right?
The government, yeah.
The government, okay, sure.
They're going to give that money to another corporation.
So he panics and he has to do human trials immediately, right? I'm trying to think. Do they rush for Doc? Wait, what?
I mean, he could have experimented on his son. Hey, Dad, what are you doing today? Just get into the lab, my son. That's going to be all right.
Where's the lamb for this offering? You'll see, my son.
And God spoke to Norman Osborn and said,
do it!
Do it! Push the button!
Do it!
Check the formula. Check your goats.
Just do it.
Oh, no. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying Nike's going to sue us
with Norman Osborn.
Is that he plowed ahead, right?
Yeah.
Because he's going to lose prestige. He's going to lose, I guess, potentially his company, right? With Doc Ock, he wanted to create a new energy source, right?
Yeah.
And then the tiny little glass thing that controls the entire evilness of it.
Maybe he should have put a protective case around that glass thing on his neck.
You would think so.
Get some vibranium and put some alloy on that.
Yeah. If I could do a do-over, right? Just theoretically, right? At Doc Ock, I would get out I would create some kind of fabricator machine, and I would recreate that piece that broke and put it back on his neck and make him better. And I would make it not out of glass, but like metal. But what the hell? Who knows?
To
right?
be fair, he did get the power of the sun. He got Sunny D'd and he got electrocuted.
Major Sunny D'd. Oh, that's what happened, right? Yeah.
Too much power of the sun.
Too much power.
Too much OJ.
He had too much responsibility.
Too much.
And so he gave it all away to the claw machine on his back. What's the first thing you want to do now that you're free? I want to kill all the doctors. Okay, so you want to be free. Okay, now you're free. What do you want to do? I want to rob a bank. No, what's the next thing you want to do? I want to steal from the rich. Can we talk about the third film?
Yeah.
No Way Home?
Oh, okay.
We're going to have a dividing line.
We're going to have a dividing line here. This is your chance to bow out now if you have not seen No Way Home. What is your thought?
So, purely coincidentally, there's this fabricator, and they fabricate this thing for Doc Ock's back. And they put it, just as I said. It's incredible.
In No Way Home, yes, I do.
It's incredible. It's just as I said, right? Man, I'm full of great ideas. But no, actually, but I think is very fascinating to consider is this. So they fix Doc Ock, right? By giving him a new implant, right? A better one, right? One made of metal, I guess, so whatever it's made of, right?
One that's not going to break as easily, one that gives him control,
Yes.
kind of.
Now, here what I think is fascinating, and maybe sad, question mark, it unmakes Spider-Man 2. Now, obviously, all the fixes unmake the previous films, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I get that. But what makes it powerful, right, is that Doc Ock sees the wrong that he's done, right? And manages to overpower the mind of the machine, right?
Okay.
The claws, right?
Yeah.
And forces them to go to their death with him.
In the Spider-Man 2, yeah.
In Spider-Man 2. By just simply fixing him, you don't feel that victory, right?
That's true, yeah.
Now, it's a fan service delight, but I don't know. What do you think of that? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Because the power of...
he realizes, right, that he's wrong, and then lifts, like in his mind, so to speak, right, lifts the world up, right, which manifests materially as him stopping the claws from dictating what
his
to
actions,
do,
yeah.
and he flips it, right. It says, "Listen to me," right.
Powerful performance, by the way, by Alfred Molina in that moment.
It's marvelous, in my opinion. Yeah.
And it gives the iconic line of "I will not die, a monster," as he drags the sun with him.
He drags the Sunny D back to the depths of the earth.
You had a little bit. Wow, why does the Sunny D taste so watery?
Oh man.
But no, I agree.
It's full of salt water.
Part of that is that it truly is Dr. Octavius in that moment willing himself to be a better person versus using some sort of biotech to rechange his
because specifically
life.
he very much like the Green Goblin, right? Slash Norman has this problem that he's fighting, right? He's fighting this host who's come into his body and controls his actions, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, correct. So it's kind of like that really good film we watched, right?
Yeah.
Based on that international best-selling book, right? The Host. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Oh my gosh, I hate you.
Oh, that was Saoirse's best role.
I will say that does take away from it.
Yes.
At the same time, it's still, man. I feel more conflicted about Green Goblin than I do about Doc Ock, if that makes sense. And what that undoes.
Okay, I'll hear you out.
Because for me, I remember so after the trilogy, we watched the trilogy. I gave that kind of wild fan theory that was just kind of what if, and without really any serious thought that this is actually the case. But in the moment of Spider-Man, the line of "Farewell, Spider-Man," and then he presses the button and he has the glider.
Oh, Godspeed.
Godspeed, thank you. Godspeed, Spider-Man, and he has the glider try to hit Spidey in that moment, and then Peter Parker just backflips over it. There was a moment where it's kind of shouldn't you, as a world-renowned physicist and scientist, realize that if Peter Parker, with his Spidey sense, realizes what you're doing, you're going to kill yourself because the glider's coming at you? And my theory, my crazy fan theory was what if, in that moment, Norman Osborn did that on purpose because he did want to kill himself because he was tired of fighting the goblin inside his mind. But the film gave you no real reason to believe that the goblin and Norman were separate entities, that they were both the same. I think the way that Sam Raimi played it was that he was slowly becoming the goblin, and that the goblin and Norman Osborn are one and the same person now.
Well, kind of. One influence, well, sort of. I'm not sure it goes that far, but because he literally talks to himself, right?
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't even talk to himself. It's a Gollum Smeagol situation, right? Which is one who is just pure, I don't know, I guess pure evil or pure malice or some sort of bad business, of the yin yang, informing the other side, yo, you do want to do this, right? It's the devil on your shoulder, except there's no opposite. The opposite is you, right? You are the good.
And another reason I had that theory was that because his final line to Peter Parker, not Spider-Man, to Peter Parker, his final line is, "Don't tell Harry," and then he collapses and dies. And what I always liked, and I realize that now looking back on it, was the idea of the reason we're allowed to mourn Norman Osborn is maybe the belief that there is still Norman Osborn inside the father who probably will and doesn't understand his son, doesn't understand how to be a good father, but at the same time wants to be, even if he goes about it in terrible ways.
I think he does. I think he exhibits actually very good fatherly skills. He does some remarkable fathering in the elevator, as you recall on Thanksgiving.
Oh, things every Thanksgiving. But
he gets my vote for Father of the Year.
Again, spoiler for Far From Home, warning, jump like 10 seconds. But Far From Home kind of takes that theory and actually makes it real. It literally is that Norman Osborn is always, like the way they play it is that Norman Osborn is always fighting the Green Goblin. Which to me takes away a lot from the original trilogy and what being the Green Goblin means and what it means for Harry to follow in his footsteps.
How so?
Well, because I think, again, this is the fault of Spider-Man 3 that they don't really clarify what Harry's thinking about his father in this moment, why he wants to avenge him so bad, besides his kind of unshaking love for his father, who never really seemed to understand or respect him.
Yes.
The third film shouldn't have, needed to do a better job of this, which is Harry follows in the Green Goblin's footsteps because he sees, and at least this is how I interpret Harry's actions, because it is extremely vague and not well done in the third film. He sees the Green Goblin as something that possessed and overtook his father, and that if Spider-Man had done more, he could have saved Norman Osborn, right? That in his mind is like Spider-Man chose to kill the Green Goblin, and doing so killing Norman Osborn. To Harry's mind, Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin are two separate beings, and that if Spider-Man had just done more to help Norman control the Goblin side of his personality, his father didn't need to die.
Well, that did feel convenient to me how he just kind of whips out this formula, doesn't he?
Yeah.
With the serum to the Green Goblin to kill him, right? It seems weirdly straightforward. I thought about it for a long time, and here it is, right? Isn't that what happened? Basically?
Yeah.
And it's like, and
that's another
wild.
thing that I think Far From Home is a fabulous movie, but it does do a lot of easy fixes that were not easy fixes for the original trilogy, which I have conflicting feelings of, because Far From Home is a fabulous film, and and thematically and the way they play it out does work. But if you do think about it too hard, you kind of question whether or not it undermines Sam Raimi's trilogy.
Well, in a certain sense, that's exactly what it's doing, but in a fun way. That's there for the question, if that makes sense.
Okay, because the film is purposely...
Literally what it's doing is undermining the entire thing by fixing the problems that they have in the first place, right? And killing, by extension, the payoffs, right? If you fix Green Goblin, he doesn't have the great line, "Don't tell Harry," slumps over dead.
Yeah.
That's great. It's great entertainment, Now it's not great entertainment for him because he's dead and he died terribly. Which is the point, right? Which is, have some humanity for these tortured people, right? Obviously,
but again, I think it's trying to, in a weird way, it simplifies a complicated problem, which is sometimes you can't fix something. There isn't a fix for everything, right? The idea that Harry wants is things that Peter Parker / Spider-Man could have saved his father if he had just tried harder is nonsensical because of the way the first Spider-Man plays out, which is the way they stage it is he's going to die. There's no opportunity. Norman Osborn. The way they staged it in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. There's nothing that Peter Parker really could have done in that last villain scene to have changed the situation. Same thing with Doc Ock. that there's nothing Peter Parker could have really done in that situation to have a different outcome, and that's the way the films play it. So maybe like what Far From Home is suggesting is that the films should have just came up with different endings to allow the villains to survive, right? And that's why it kind of Far From Home is meta in the sense that it kind of questions why do we always need to kill off the supervillains, right?
Yes.
What makes a supervillain in the first place? Well, part of it is Far From Home's kind of theme. It's something everyone creates. Like everyone is responsible for creating supervillains in a sense that you choose to either help people or you choose not to help people. Even though the villains that appear in Far From Home kind of did bad things, none of them truly chose to be what they became.
Well, that's exactly the problem that they're reckoning with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact that if you import these people into the MCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems weird to punish them, or even though they're dead, right? Looking back, retroactively, right?
Mm-hmm.
It feels weird to punish them for, in a certain sense, being schizophrenic, right?
Yeah.
Or having some kind of, multiple personality or dissociative kind of disorder, so to speak, once again, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a supernatural way, right?
Hey, mental health issues are real, people.
Yes, definitely real.
And that's what Far From Home kind of is getting at.
It's taking a situation where you can figure out what exactly it's getting at on a human level, and then making it more extravagantly,
instead of killing them off.
Insane, right? Yeah.
The metaphor there is instead of like slowly killing off people with mental health issues, why don't we do something to help?
That's exactly what they're saying. What I mean? That's exactly the metaphor, which carries a lot of the weight of why you're ruining the original films, right? Which is they're not trying to. They're making a statement about something, right?
The villains were always in the original Spider-Man. They were never dealing with mental health issues in the way that Far From Home treats them as it. They were always like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, Venom. In that trilogy, they were foils for Peter's. For Peter to
that's principally
become
what's going on,
more responsible, become a better version of Spider-Man. So
yes,
and I think that for me, I'm okay with the use of bringing back the villains in Far From Home. I'm totally okay with the fact that.
Oh, I'm okay with it.
I totally think it works because again, I think it's a good thing that they went in that direction, that they opened up the world of superheroes and supervillains in the MCU in that direction of not every villain we face needs to be killed. Not every villainry in the MCU sense sometimes isn't a thing you can just physically fight. Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the MCU villains, even human villains, are like inherently bad people. That it's like no question of, oh, you didn't do this didn't happen to you by accident. Like Thanos didn't accidentally want to destroy half of the galaxy's population. Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 didn't accidentally murder all of his kids. You know what I mean? Like there's this sense of in the Sam Raimi and even in the Amazing Spider-Man films, that the villains are created either by accident or because they had good intentions that went wrong.
Well, here's the most obvious example that we should actually place in front. It's your favorite. Who's your favorite
villain?
Yeah.
Electro?
No. Think of the MCU.
Oh, I'm thinking of Spider-Man specifically.
No, who's your favorite? I know you know it. I'll give you one option. I'll give you 5 seconds to think of your quote favorite villain.
Oh, okay. So like Killmonger is definitely up there, but you said that sarcastically.
You're
so
wrong.
like,
I'll tell you, Ben. When you read off the right words in the right order, he turns into a killing machine, and is subject to your every command. Exactly right, Bucky. You love Bucky.
Winter Soldier.
Oh, you love him. So logically, he should be killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is they reform him, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how they do it. They just do it somehow.
The power of friendship somehow. He sees Captain America, and I can't remember the Winter Soldier very well.
He runs off. And then he is.
They hide him in Wakanda.
Yeah, and then I don't know how they fix him. Maybe they don't, or maybe he uses.
He kind of does dump him on the doorstep of Black Panther and say, "Hey, he's your problem. He's your problem now."
I think like something like that. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but that's a very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're working with a very similar arc.
True.
So that's a good reference point for when we're talking about like these villains that we're importing.
The difference, though, is that we don't see Bucky's reformation, and I think that was always a big mistake in
understood
the MCU.
that's true, but it is understood that he is.
I guess. I still think
Plus,
they made a mistake by
you didn't watch the television show.
That's true. I haven't.
Neither did I, except the first episode or two.
But here's the thing: between the Winter Soldier and Black Panther, a span of several films, he's supposed to be fully reformed. So,
Well,
watching the TV show doesn't matter in that regard.
I'm not sure, once again, in the sense that I don't think he has numbers rattled off or words rattled off, and he suddenly becomes a, the Manchurian candidate suddenly. I don't think so, but,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think all three versions of the Spider-Man film franchises, Spider-Man, Sam Raimi, Amazing Spider-Man, and by the way, Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have had the Sinister Six in it, and so that might, if it hadn't gotten canceled, that maybe would have been our introduction to the Vulture.
That's right.
Which would have been really cool.
You could have gotten that weird circus guy.
The Kraven?
Is that what he's
the
called?
Kraven the Hunter?
Yeah. The guy with like the net walking around.
Yeah.
Come on, capture you.
And that would have been really interesting. I kind of would be curious to know what they had intended for that third one, because one, you obviously deal with the fallout of Gwen Stacy's death, but now you have the rise of the superhero league that is specifically out to try to kill Spider-Man, which would have been interesting. And who knows, they might go back to the Sinister Six in the MCU. In Spider-Man Homecoming, the Vulture is put in prison, so we know he's still out there.
Mm-hmm.
The Shocker doesn't die in Homecoming. I'm pretty sure he just gets away, if my memory serves right. The guy with the glove and the electricity powering through it, and just punches things with a supercharge. I think he gets hit by a...
Who are you talking about? Ant-Man 2?
No. Spider-Man Homecoming, the one that works with the Vulture, one of his associates. He's the one with the glove.
The one who gets promoted after Keaton incinerates his other.
He's the Shocker, so he's also one of the Sinister Six.
Oh, okay. So he's
and so he's still alive, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think the MCU definitely could do that, but all in all three Spider-Man franchises have something great going for it. I kind of would be interested to see if they would take it further with the multiverse opening up.
Interesting.
Andrew Garfield's still young. I don't think Tobey Maguire would come back and do a Spider-Man 4, for instance.
I doubt it.
Because he's gotten older now. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
But Andrew Garfield probably could still do it if he wanted to.
If they really wanted to, they could. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We didn't talk about this, but I probably won't bring it up because it's going to take us well over time. But
bring it up and I'll respond to it for 5 seconds.
Okay. Spider-Man 3,
yeah.
Mary Jane Watson should have turned into Venom. And it would have made the film 100 times better.
That is intriguing a lot to unpack, but we can't do it, so goodbye.